Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Productized podcast. This is the podcast where innovators, product creators, entrepreneurs come to discuss impactful ideas. Our mission is to inspire more people to build great product experiences. My name is André Marquet and I'll be your host today. Today, I talk with João Freitas, a builder at heart, a passionate surfer, engineer by training. He defines himself as finding meaning in creating value for others by structuring and executing new businesses. He goes surfing as much as possible. His brain thinks in systems like boxes and arrows, and someone who's deeply committed to embracing a continuous learning mindset as he develops himself and supports others in doing the same while having fun, hopefully. So welcome to the podcast, João.
Very happy to be here. Hi.
Thanks. I'm also excited. And it's Cofidis' newest building, which is arguably, at least in my opinion, one of the best office building in Lisbon at this moment.
Yeah, well, it's our home right now, and
It is.
it's a great place to create useful stuff.
Cool. So, who inspired you to pursue your studies in tech?
Well, so I started studying electrical and computer engineering, frankly, because I was good at math and physics, etc. at school, and so I wanted to study something that would open up doors and kind of broaden the possibilities rather than narrowing it down too early, right? So I was also very interested in economics and in general, because my dad he was an economist by background, but yeah, inspired perhaps a little bit by him, who despite his economics background, he kind of pivoted into a career in tech, right? So he was his last job was as CIO of the national railway company in Portugal. So basically all the IT systems and infrastructure which are necessary to make sure that trains run in a safe and orderly manner. And I guess his duality at the end of the day inspired me not just to focus on the things which I was good at, like math and physics, etc., but also kind of complemented by interests of reading different stuff, right? So books around political philosophy, economics, etc. And I had always this dual interest, and while deciding where to go and study at university, my reasoning was I should go to the field which actually could give me more leverage in terms of future opportunities. And inspired also by the examples of people who studied engineering and then opened up for kind of broader management careers, and not seeing the same happening the other way around. So people going into economics or management.
Did you actually think like that back in the day, or you just kind of reverse thinking your way to those days?
No, I think I thought about it like that. I was obviously very coached by my dad, who was a very important figure as I grew up, and I guess if I look at it back now, I think it's a choice that makes sense, right? At the end of the day, you will always need to learn how to navigate new topics yourself and how to do self-study and self-development, and obviously it's much more easy to do that in fields which are more perhaps a bit less technical or more mainstream, rather than like pure engineering stuff. So it's really back then where my interest for this sort of topics materialized, and I think electrical and computer engineering in specifically was very interesting, because in itself as an engineering discipline it's quite broad, right? So you have stuff like electronics, like high voltage stuff, you have the telecommunications part, you have the computer engineering part. So it's quite eclectic as a field, and so it gives you kind of a broad base of education, which I kind of complemented on the side with a lot of activities kind of gravitating around the university, more around kind of associations and junior enterprises,
Okay.
where I saw really the opportunity of converging engineering disciplines to build stuff and provide products and services, and converging with management capabilities to, like, as in running an organization for profit.
So my question to you is, why do you think so few young people actually have that kind of mental framework of saying, okay, maybe I want to go to something where I'm going to be leveraged, where I have more options in the future, and they end up going to stuff that, closes them options, and then, after a few years in the marketplace, they end up saying, oh, maybe I have to, I don't know, study programming or go back to the school to get the skills that I didn't get in the first place. So yeah, maybe a little bit unfair because you're not other young people, but since you had that kind of framework, where do you see the root to that reasoning system of yours?
Well, I think, we are very shaped by our environment, and as we are young, our family, particularly our parents and friends of our parents, and kind of your natural ecosystem, is something which is really kind of pivotal in terms of the influence it has on you. And I guess I looking back, I think this was a bit by chance of being born and raised in a particular ecosystem, and not necessarily because I learned or I've become acquainted with this sort of thinking in the more, let's say, traditional school system, etc. Right? So it was more out of influence by my sphere rather than something else. I believe today things might be changing a bit. Because from what I know, there's more and more schools that are opening up less traditional, let's say, optional classes or activities, which I think are really important to expose young people to other stuff. However, I think we still live a bit in a culture, especially when it comes to, let's say, the schooling system, where difficult things, they get a bad rep. And I'm not sure how many of you listening have tried programming, but obviously it's something which is highly technical. It's something which is not necessarily very obvious. It comes with a particular way of thinking and structuring the way you look at things and problems. And if we are not able to develop or to help develop tools and systems so that young kids have the ability to be more open towards experimenting, open towards difficult things, open towards failure. If we don't do that, the ability or the probability that people exposed to these difficult topics will have a hard time in their first clash. And I think that's an important thing.
All right, so you got out of uni and your first job was in the tech industry at large.
Well, kind of. So I would say that my first job, although it was not a paying job, was the job of running a junior company. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept, but basically...
With Junitech?
No, it was the other one. So in the Technical University of Lisbon, in Instituto Superior Técnico, so the leading engineering school in Portugal. Yeah. You have basically two junior enterprises. You have Junitech, which is in the Lisbon campus, and you have Systems Group, which is in the Oeiras campus.
Okay.
And although I studied in the Lisbon campus, I lived close to the Oeiras campus. And this Systems Group organization was essentially a student-run company, which delivered, let's say, at large technology solutions, not only, but mostly technology solutions and products to small and medium businesses. And I joined basically to run a project which the company was doing for a client in the hospitality business back in the day.
Now, what was your role?
Yeah, so I was kind of, let's say in today's words, product manager, but essentially I was running the whole research, ideation, and build kind of cycle for that particular product. It was interesting because
was it a software product?
It was a software product which was wrapped in a hardware component. This was like 2010, so it was really early days of mobile technology, especially in Portugal, which is always obviously a few years lagging other more advanced or more sophisticated,
markets.
Probably, let's say advanced markets, to make it gentle. And yeah, back then, so iPads and iPhones and those sorts of things were new. And the idea was to build an app which would be embedded on an iPad experience, and which would be made available as a digital concierge in luxury hotels in Lisbon. So we, without knowing, because at that time, like product and all these things, I mean, for me, they were completely unheard of concepts. But we used the logic of finding a persona, finding a partner to get feedback from, and to build it with, building a prototype, launching it in a hotel, getting feedback from the hotel and the customers.
All right. So was this a product that some hotel asked your junior company to build,
No.
or you guys came up with the concept?
Yeah, we came up with the concept, and then we received a couple of feedback rounds from like a couple of hotel kind of general managers, and based on that we decided that there was enough evidence for us to go build something. And that
Which
was
you did.
That was my role back in the day. Yeah.
What happened to that project?
Well, it kind of crashed because the product worked. It was kind of, it looked really good, and back in the day, we were really proud.
You were proud of the baby.
We were really proud of it. But yeah, so we had, like, we were three people. One of them went to study in Holland. The other one decided to drop university. Like, he was a really sophisticated engineer who was programming since he was 7 or so, and he decided to drop out of school and go work in a I think it was like a 3D motion company in Sweden.
Drop out of university.
Yeah, so he dropped out of university, and there I was alone with.
He's the most successful guy of all of your.
Well, I haven't spoken to him in a while, but I would say that
maybe you should send him this podcast.
The probability is quite high that he's the most successful one. Yeah, but anyway, so I think we reached the point in which, like, we had the pilot running in a couple of hotels, but then things are not so, like, things don't flow as
right. Life gets in the way
as you imagine them, and then the team starts to shake a little bit, and so I think it failed because of our sheer lack of experience. I mean, we were 19 and 20.
What happened to you? So you ended up you're obviously not a dropout, and then you went outside of Portugal.
Yeah, so I was doing that, and then the year after I ran to basically be in charge of the company. So that organization has a yearly election cycle, and the idea is to give more students the opportunity to run the company. So I ran, and I got elected.
So you became a manager.
I became a manager.
A real manager.
So that was
that was your first management experience.
My first management experience when I was 20.
Okay.
And so I combined the last year of my bachelor degree in electrical and computer engineering with that managing role at.
How hard was that?
Systems Group. It was pretty hard. I mean. Engineering school is not for the faint-hearted. Like, it's hard work. Yes. Obviously, in the third year, I think you're kind of already a bit used to it. So you have your systems in place, and you know how the flow goes. So you're more prepared to be able to start and parallelize with different stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's how I did it. And then I decided to basically find a master's program abroad to go and explore, and that's how I ended up in Belgium, where I've studied for a year. I did my master's, like quite an intensive one in 1 year.
So you said, okay, I want. So what was the reasoning process to decide, one, to go out of Portugal, and two, that specific university, or at least that specific master's area that you ended up choosing? And by the way, which was it?
So I did a master's in like the umbrella term, it was called information management, but it was essentially applied statistics, right? So both on the, let's say, application side of things, right? So really on methods and on algorithms and machine learning, etc. But also a bit upstream from that in terms of what are the infrastructure fundamentals that you need in terms of systems design, in terms of database design, etc., for you to build your systems to capture and run data so that you can after implement the more sophisticated stuff on top. So it was quite interesting. My decision was essentially, I would say, inspired by a friend who did it like 1 year before I did. So actually it was one of the guys of the hotel product who went to study in the Netherlands, and his experience was a bit of an inspiration for me. So I would say, like, as in between brackets, surround yourself by people who like take chances and take risks and do difficult
like you're the average
stuff.
You're the average of your 5 best friends, right?
Yeah, I mean, don't give it a second thought. I mean, that's definitely true. So surround yourself.
Yeah, that's so true.
By interesting people, and you'll get inspired by them, and hopefully you will be able to inspire them as well at different points in your life. So I think that was part of it. Another one was, I think, a deep-seated curiosity around exploring the unknown, which I think also comes very much from the side of my mother, who in the 80s, and let's not forget, I mean, this was 40 years ago, so right now it might not seem very impressive, but 40 years ago, as a single woman, she decided to go live abroad by herself in the UK, and she taught at the University of Liverpool for 7 years, Portuguese literature, before she actually knew my dad.
You had that reference of going abroad and studying abroad.
Yeah.
And so that was studying abroad, and what motivated you to get a little bit out of the engineering path, right? Because you ended up going to information management systems. Why was that?
Yeah, I think, again, that was probably a continuation of the reasoning that got me to study engineering in the first place. So it was with the idea of broadening my scope, of complementing my skills and giving me exposure to other things, right? So I had...
Because I guess most of your colleagues, they go default mode. They just go to the masters of the same course that they were doing at the Instituto Superior Técnico, right?
Yeah, I would say that's probably the most common path.
All right, so you were in Belgium, you got your master's, and then let's go to work.
Yeah, let's go to work. So I can't say that I really started in the tech industry. If I put aside the Systems Group junior enterprise context,
right,
which I really interpret as my first job, although it was an unpaid job. But if we take that aside, I actually started to work in the energy sector. In a large organization called Shell, one of the biggest companies in the world. And although, well, it's an energy company, but it has a really, really strong engineering foundation. So although I was not working in the tech sector, I was working in a context, in a culture, in an environment which is filled with engineers, which has a really, really kind of engineering driven way of thinking and of running the company, and also surrounded by quite impressive capabilities and R&D and technology, right?
So what were the biggest challenges you faced in that specific industry?
So I think there were challenges that were associated with working in a company with that scale, right? So it's one of the biggest companies in the world. Yeah, it's one of the biggest companies in the world. Like at that time, it had around, I think, 100,000 staff plus 400,000 contractors. So basically 500,000 people working across the globe for the company. So it's like really big. And I think, like, as you get in, like fresh from university, it's a bit, not necessarily overwhelming, but it's a bit like I think I struggled a little to find my space in the beginning, because everything seemed just so big that how can I actually contribute? How can I actually have an impact?
Right.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough that things came my way, and I had a bunch of very interesting opportunities that happened relatively quickly. But in that first impact was really, wow, this is big, and like, how should I navigate this? I think there were also a couple of challenges associated with the industry, and because obviously, like today we call it an energy company. Actually, it's one of the largest renewables investors and operators in the world. But back then, it's a company. It was a company that had a really a really clear connection to an industry which was and which is a dirty industry, right? So it's a highly pollutant industry, but it's a polluting industry which is necessary to run the world as we know it, right? If we didn't have this sort of companies, like the light on the bulbs would not blink, and we would not have the infrastructure and quality of life.
In 2022, by the end of 2022, that's pretty clear at this moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you ended up being involved in a project inside Shell to develop what could be defined as a corporate startup, right?
Yeah.
So what's that story about, and what was that startup actually trying to do?
Yeah, so that was a very cool experience. It was actually my last role before I left Shell and came back to Portugal a bit temporarily, because I left again afterwards. But so the last mission which I was kind of invited to execute was to join a bunch of colleagues and launch a corporate venture, which was part of a broader, let's say, business building program within Shell. So essentially the company at some point...
Those business building programs, they were fully financed by Shell itself?
Fully financed by Shell. And really they were born out of the realization that digital technology and digital innovation were completely disrupting like all businesses across sectors, right? And in the culture of Shell, like, this is really a company which operates at all different time horizons simultaneously, right? So it can only be like that, right? Because they are doing R&D, which only will be able to be monetized in 10 years from now, right?
Yeah, they were actually one of the inventors of the perspective studies back in the 1970s.
For sure. The scenarios. Very famous Shell scenarios. Right. Exactly. So they are used to doing that, and therefore their idea was, okay, let's look at our complete value chain, and let's see where are we at risk of being attacked by a digital disruptor. And we are talking about the value chain, which has probably like 50 businesses with P&Ls which over like $1 billion. Like, it's huge business, actually huge multiple businesses. And then the idea was to pinpoint opportunities. And one of those which we found was the idea that our retail business back then could be at risk. And the retail business is essentially composed out of the retail sites where people go and fill up their tanks.
The gas stations.
Exactly, gas stations. It's a more colloquial way of of calling them.
Which I've heard, as you know, someone was telling the story about gas stations the other day, that a big part of their business is actually not selling gas, but selling all the other stuff other than gas, right? The stuff that you buy.
For sure, like the margins there are really big.
Right.
It's actually called in the industry NFR, so non-fuel retailing.
Right.
And it's a very important part of the P&L of a gas station.
A gas station.
Yeah.
So you guys said, okay, how can we disrupt gas stations?
How can we disrupt gas stations? Because if you think about it, one, like, these things are expensive. Like the capex of building one is actually quite expensive. The opex is also expensive to maintain it. no one really likes to go and fill up their cars. That's the reality. I mean, there could
especially me.
Well, yeah, I've heard you had some adventures in regarding that part of your life recently.
Yeah.
But people don't like it. Like what happened to you, they can make a mistake and fit the wrong nozzle in the car and have a problem afterwards.
Yeah.
The depth of the problem depends on whether you click you turn on the car afterwards or not, which gladly you haven't done. So the problem is not so deep. But anyway, people don't like it, right?
So that was the first insight. People don't like to necessarily. This is not the enjoyable experience. So what have you done?
Like,
I went to the gas station. Oh man,
it's a waste of time. Like it smells bad.
Right.
Especially
if you could avoid it, you would.
Can avoid,
you could avoid it. You would.
Imagine like you're an executive, like you're a female 40-year-old executive.
Right.
You have your suit on, like you have your nails done from the weekend. Like
the last thing you want to do is fuel the car.
Like getting your hands dirty, like it smells bad, etc. Right. So people don't like it. And in a second huge trend which we saw back then, like this was 2016, 17, was really the surge of apps which were actually built around bringing convenience to people's lives.
So-called on-demand economy.
On-demand economy, like it was kind of growing up in Europe massively, 2015, 16, etc. So it was a bit the convergence of these elements. So the risk of, can we actually be, like, can there be a player who is doing this in a completely different way and putting our business at risk? Secondly, can we actually make people circumvent the need to go to a gas station, which is something.
And what was your solution? What did you came up with?
So the idea was simple, although a bit crazy. So imagine a world in which there's no gas stations. Like there's no gas stations, and actually there's no fixed physical infrastructure to deliver energy for mobility. And this could include in the umbrella both gas stations, but also physical chargers to charge up your electric car or your hybrid. And imagine that all energy for mobility is delivered in a fully flexible, on-demand and mobile way. So imagine, as a second derivative of that, imagine a world in which you have a bunch of very small electric cars with a tank on the back, and this tank either has like liquid fuel or a supercharger, and they are driving around the city, and based on what people with their apps on the phones, based on their demand for a fill up, or how we called the business back then tap up. So you tap your phone and then someone would come and fill up your car. That's why tap up. And based on this whole mobile infrastructure of these little cars going around and filling up based on where people would put their PIN and would book and say, well, I need my car filled up at 4 a.m. The car is parked here outside of my house, or it's parked here at 5 p.m. in my office building. And then all of these mobile kind of squad of vehicles would go around and fill them up. So imagine in one line, Uber for fuel delivery.
All right. So you were doing that, and somehow you guys needed to pivot the business because for some reason, and I've heard you telling the story before, but I didn't understand, was there a real need to pivot, or in your own opinion there was no need to pivot, and you guys you were not fully vested in the way that you wanted to go in the first place?
I think pivoting was needed from the perspective of quickly arriving to a profitable scenario, which was not necessarily, in my opinion, the biggest driver of the whole exercise, right? So I think we were trying to build something or to discover something that would become mainstream and relevant like a bunch of years later. So I think the need to pivot if that was the business context around the pivot, and when the pivot was actually executed, I was not there anymore, so I'm not fully aware of the discussions at that point. But my my perspective on the whole subject was that we should have continued to iterate on our value proposition and on our way of operating to find the right way of having product market fit and of understanding how can we actually build a business around the concept.
But you ended up not having product market fit, at least not in the B2C.
Not in the B2C. But we didn't have product market fit after one or two iterations on the whole business, right? Which by any normal standards is not enough, right? Because you actually need to try a bunch of different ways of getting it, because the probability, especially when it's something so disruptive, the probability that it's going to be a home run on your first try is actually probably is quite low, right?
All right, so your thesis is that you should have kept iterating the developed proposition for a while.
I think so.
But that didn't happen.
That didn't happen.
So you said, guys, good luck, and you moved on.
Yeah, well, I didn't agree with the whole direction. Also, at that time, I had some personal kind of reasons to return to Portugal. My dad was quite ill at that time, so I decided it was a good time to move on and do something else.
All right, so you're back in Portugal, and you know I know a bunch of things happening in a while. You ended up working for a local startup here, which, by the way, has been quite successful in the automated retail space, and eventually you were invited to join Cofidis.
Yeah, that was it. So I was invited to join as head of innovation, not in the executive team of Cofidis Portugal, but reporting directly to the CEO, right? With a very clear mandate of developing a company-wide innovation strategy. And then putting it in motion, and I really felt that it was a really interesting opportunity as a next step, especially because the sheer amount of enthusiasm that the CEO had when he was telling me this story and his vision for the company, that was really energizing, right? And although I was relatively young back then, I had already done a bunch of things, right? So and I met various people across geographies and industries and contexts, etc. And back then I understood that like the people who are around you, one more time, here I'm not talking about necessarily friends, but your direct team, your boss, like those people play a very disproportionate role in terms of the success you can have on a particular role and the fun you can have, right? So I think, for example, those people, they are much more important than the industry or the brand or the concept. I mean, if you have the right people around you, if you have the right support, if you have the right vision, the right empowerment, I think you can make an opportunity out of where there seems to be something which is not such an exciting opportunity.
So absolutely, and you've been here in Cofidis for how many years?
3 years now.
3 years now. What have been the most innovative, I guess the key word here is innovative, projects that you have worked in the last 3 years here at Cofidis? So I guess that's what people really want to know, right? They look at this company, which is, incumbent company, right? Which has been operating in Portugal for almost 30 years now. And they ask, okay, I understand the company is kind of doing something fresh and new, but what is really innovative in the last 3 years?
Okay, so I think, first of all, let me just jump in with a small detail around the word project, which you use there. I think for us, here at Cofidis, one of the huge shifts that we've made over the last 3 years is really to think of the company and run the company as a product-led company. And this means that we have specific parts of the business which are oriented according to the product way of working and product structure, and therefore they are not projects which have a beginning and an end. They are things which are here for the long run and are playing kind of the infinite game. And therefore,
I love that. Infinite game.
These products are part today of the fabric of the company. And I would say the most innovative things that we've done so far, like there's things that happened at the product level, and then there's also, I would say, innovative things that happen more on an organizational level and how we approach and how we run the entire company. Mm-hmm. So at the product level, I can give you a couple of examples. So, and actually I'll give you examples of things which existed before I arrived, but being transformed into a product way of working and a product framing, they've been completely revamped with very interesting results.
So they have been productized.
Things
that were not products, now they were productized inside the company.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one dimension of examples I can give. Another one is actually new products which have been launched and, their reasoning and their impact and everything. And then the third topic is around the organization. So one for each.
Right.
Things that have been productized and have delivered massive amounts of value. So for example, we are essentially a consumer finance company, right? So we deliver mostly credit products to customers, and we do it in a completely remote way, right? So 55 years ago when we arrived, we used to do it over the phone. It was actually pretty innovative back then. It was actually a new category, mm-hmm. credit over the phone, instead of credit at a physical location, at a physical branch of a bank. But then with the growth, with the surge and growth of the internet, the model pivoted into a remote way of evaluating creditworthiness and of granting credit through the internet. And our business today has like two different legs. It has a B2C leg and it has a B2B2C leg. The B2B2C leg is where we work with auto dealers and with retailers, specialized retailers, let's say in health or in sports or in furniture or whatever. And at the point of sale, they use Cofidis credit products to essentially have a better value proposition for the customers of these retailers. And here our operation, again, is managed fully remotely through digital channels in which we are able to assess, with the help of the retailer, gather data from the customer, make an automated credit decision based on our credit decision models, and then grant or not the credit. So this is B2B2C. Mm-hmm. And on the B2C side, we are basically like a digital lender, right? So we have a huge investment, let's say, in digital marketing, right? Across channels and across typologies of content, and then we have essentially an e-commerce site which is used to subscribe for credit products, and this site it was used to be managed a little bit as kind of an institutional website with the ability to collect some data from customers, and with that data then have an army of credit advisors calling the people to gather more data and to make sure that
it's much more of a push operation.
Yeah, kind of a push operation. And we've recently now, it's been a year and a half or so, we've completely revamped our website to work purely as a pure e-commerce play, in which we are able to convert leads that come in either organically or through the digital investments, and basically give them a completely fluid and integrated experience, which allows them to choose the right credit product for their needs, and just helping them along the way from a perspective of gathering the right data, of doing the KYC of the customer, and at the end of the day, having a credit decision and transferring the amount into the customer's account, right? So this product now, so the website of Cofidis is managed as a product now, has a fully complete product team, which is composed out of product managers, associate product managers, designers, data folks, engineers, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And these folks are basically organized to continuously experiment on how do we give the best experience, how do we increase conversion.
Right. Do they keep doing continuous discovery and adding value to the user.
Exactly. And we do this like before. Maybe we would run like let's say one A/B test per month. Now we run multiple A/B tests per week. Now we used to launch a new version of the website every other month or 2 months. Now we launch new versions of the website on a weekly basis, sometimes twice per week. And this cadence and this rhythm has basically has completely transformed our metrics and the way this product delivers value for the company.
So what's your big innovation thesis for a company like Cofidis?
Well, to answer your question, maybe let me go to the second dimension, which is what we've been launching and innovating on, which didn't exist before. And here I'll mention an example which has been quite talked about because I think it has had some very good growth and also some market exposure, broadly speaking, and that's called Cofidis Pay. Mm-hmm. So Cofidis Pay is an ecosystem of digital products which are centered around the buy now, pay later product solution, which is being complemented with other financial products around it, right? So we started with buy now, pay later. We'll go into credit, and then we will complete the ecosystem. We are completing the ecosystem with an app which is oriented towards the customer and which allows the customer to basically repeat purchases, to use discount or promotion codes to incentivize repeat operations in our retail network of partners, and essentially it's an ecosystem of adding value to the customer and making sure that we connect the two largest universes of personas that we add value to, so the retailers and the customers.
Mm-hmm. And I guess part of your innovation thesis resolves around making Cofidis more of fintech.
Yeah, so I think the innovation thesis, as this example demonstrates, is to be able to leverage digital technology to provide value for customers and retailers in a very, very scalable way. And why do I underscore scalable? Because traditionally, companies like Cofidis, the way they used to operate was basically very heavy on manual stuff, which would be based on the type of financial products we used to sell, which had high margins. We could accommodate that, but it was essentially a linear model. So the more demand you had as a company,
on one hand, you want to make the company more efficient.
On the one hand, we want to be able to run the company in a very efficient way, in a very scalable way, because we believe that there's a lot of growth opportunity, but this growth should come at marginal cost, which is very low, right? And the only way to do that is through technology. But that is complemented with being able to find streams of value that will allow us to be more relevant in the lives of our customers and partners. And this could mean, for example, that instead of just providing to our auto dealers a credit product for their point of sales operation. We allow them we empower them to digitalize their business, for example. So we've made a strategic partnership with the OLX Group and the largest marketplace of auto classified ads, which is called Stand Virtual here in Portugal. And basically in this strategic partnership, we are helping all of our dealers move online and be able to be much more present in the beginning of the chain where customers are looking, when they are looking to buy a new car.
All right, so for people that don't know how Cofidis is organized, so Cofidis is a French group, and it has branches in a number of European countries, like Portugal, Spain, Italy, France, of course, and a couple of others. Aren't you afraid of foreign competitors, especially for Gen Zers that have Revolut in their pocket, suddenly offering easy digital-first credit solutions that are going in a way to disrupt offerings like this, especially because I think this is a regulated market, to the best of my knowledge, highly regulated market, yeah. But some Lithuanian company could start selling consumer credit in Portugal.
Well, not in a very easy way, frankly. I mean, obviously, we are going to... Our perspective is that there will be more and more standardization of regulation across Europe to make sure that there's this type of European place can emerge in a more integrated way, and I think that's a good thing for the market and for consumers. But today, this is not so easy, and that has been demonstrated many times by the lack of ability that these companies have had, like Revolut, in scaling their operations across Europe for things which are beyond a simple payments account. I believe
you're not very bullish about this vision.
No, I'm bullish. No, don't get me wrong. I think that's kind of a secular trend, and I think that's going to come. Now the question for us, and this is where I would like to put the emphasis on, is how can we anticipate that, and how can we forge deeper and more meaningful relationships with our customers today. Because I guess these players, first of all, this secular trend, it will take time to play out, first of all. Second, I think it's highly dependent on economic cycles. And obviously now we are starting, like we are in the midst of a downturn. I don't have a crystal ball of when that's going, for how long and how deep that is going to be. But there's people that argue that will be here for a while. And obviously Portugal as a kind of more satellite market because of our size, so it's 10 million people roughly, and normally it's usually in the bottom of priority lists for these international expansions.
Right.
So I think,
although Cofidis Portugal is the second biggest Cofidis of the group.
Yeah, that's true.
One of the most profitable ones.
That's true. So I think we are really well integrated here in the Portuguese economy. We have very strong brand. That brand has not always been known for the best reasons. I think, like, as the industry, like this industry has a history of not necessarily very transparent practices, consumer finance in general, and it's not only in Portugal, it's across Europe. Like that's been like the whole momentum of consumer finance growth in between, let's say, late 90s or mid 90s and pre-financial crisis. So there were like 15 years of really big growth, which
those were the Wolf of Wall Street years for the consumer credit.
And others in other parts of the finance industry. And I think the great financial crisis has brought a good amount of new regulation, of good oversight, and basically has been a really good catalyzer for these sort of companies to reinvent themselves, to have caps on their prices and to be able to operate or to be motivated to operate in a much leaner way, because if you have lower gross margins, that means that you'll need to find ways to automate stuff and to run in a more light way your business essentially.
All right. So I think your innovation thesis resolves from what you're saying, making Cofidis a product-led growth strategy, right? Make it a product-led company, and one of the things people could argue is, and I think you said it yourself, you are limited to Portugal alone. So it's like, I don't know, maybe 5 million adults or 7 million adults that actually, less if you actually consider the ones that actually can apply for a credit. So I don't know, maybe 5 million people. So that's it. You can be the best product-led company in Portugal, but you're still limited to the 5 million consumers here. So what is the exit strategy for that?
Well, so I think, we are part of an international group, and although we operate in a very independent way, like on a market-by-market basis, I think part of our ambition is to serve as a platform to experiment new ways of running the company and new ways of approaching our business model. And with that, like launching the fundamentals for or fostering new types of fundamentals to emerge for the whole group. And I think that's going to be a really interesting ride. I'm not sure how that's going to play out, but I think for sure that we believe in what we are doing. We think what we are doing is not bound, like this way of thinking and this philosophy is actually very relevant across markets, and it's quite geography independent.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things, of course, is disrupting a little bit the market, coming up with new revenue streams. You talked about that. Why do you think it's so hard to do disruptive or moonshot innovations in a traditional market, but also inside an incumbent like Cofidis?
Well, I think disruptive innovation, by nature, it's something difficult, right? It's difficult because, disruptive innovation that works, right? Because, there's plenty of disruptive examples of disruptive stuff that actually prove not to be scalable or profitable or even relevant, right? Mm-hmm. Something could be very disruptive, but could lack product market fit, right?
Absolutely.
So I would like to perhaps separate the two things, right? So one is the ability to try out and experiment with disruptive concepts. Another is to make those disruptive or a share of those disruptive concepts successful and scalable. On the trying out of disruptive things, why I think that's difficult in companies like ours, I think it has a lot to do with bandwidth, right? So I think these organizations, they've been here for a while, so they accumulate a lot of debt, right? And I'm using the term debt.
What kind of debt?
Yeah, I'm using the term
not financial debt in this case. That's for sure.
In a loose way, right? So
organizational debt.
Yeah, organizational debt, technical debt, cultural debt, right? And obviously all this debt has a lot of influence around the customer experiences that you provide and the value that you add for your customers, right? So all this debt is going to have a detrimental impact on the experiences that you're able to offer to your customers. And I think all this debt, when we shift the organization to work in a different way, we are attempting to tackle all this debt and to revamp the organization and to leapfrog stages of maturity to reach more ambitious and more value-adding stages. And obviously this is a company-wide effort. It's a lot of hard work. Like, you need to invest a lot of money because you need to hire people. You need to invest in technology. You need to do a bunch of things in order to leapfrog this kind of stage of maturity. And sometimes there's just not enough bandwidth to do other things. Personally, I think there needs to be always more bandwidth, and if there's no more bandwidth, we need to be creative around finding, let's say, parallel tracks in which we can do other things, because we can't, like, being only focused on transforming your core business to operate in a much better way, to give much better customer experiences. That's not enough, in my view, especially in an age where technology plays such an important role in terms of the development of society and customer habits, etc. And technology evolves in such kind of exponential ways, and such, like, technology is very 0 to 1, right? So one day, well, we have Google, the other day we have GPT-3, right? So, like, things happen from one day to the other, and those swings, they have the ability to literally disrupt whole industries and business models.
Right, they are unforeseen, and we are in a week where we have seen fusion power just be net positive for the first time in a controlled manner. What do you think is the future of the fintech industry going to look like? And speaking about technologies, and not just technologies but teams, which ones are you most excited about in this financial space, to have impact in this financial space?
Yeah.
So you spoke about, I don't know, ChatGPT. How do you see this kind of technologies coming around and actually having a dent, a real impact in this industry?
So I think the finance industry is quite old, right? I wrote an article, a couple of months ago for an economics newspaper that spoke a little bit about the history of the industry and how it emerged in the 17th century in Amsterdam, in capital markets, how the whole thing kind of shaped. And although there were, like, this is kind of the modern financial industry, although financial industry has been there for much
forever,
longer than that, right? Because
debt has been a thing. It's human, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people
it's
exchange with one another,
favors,
and therefore
money.
credit gets created, and payments are there because, like, if I give you this for that, I mean, there's a transaction, so there needs to be some sort of relationship between what we are exchanging on. So the industry has been here for a while.
Have you seen the experiment with monkeys, where they have two monkeys and they are paying monkeys, I don't know, bananas for some task, and suddenly they start paying this monkey a little bit less than the other monkey, just a little bit less.
I haven't seen it.
The monkey gets crazy. It gets really crazy. So it's innate to the human nature, I guess, even to the primate nature, because at the end of the day, that's what we are, just a bunch of primates, right? With fancy clothes and MacBook Pros, to be a little bit mad with debt, right? Especially when it goes wrong.
No, for sure. I mean, like, there's a sense of justice as well, which is inherent to us.
Exactly.
And I think, the financial industry plays an important role there. However, like, no matter how developed the whole industry has gotten and you can argue that to some extent, like, it has gotten more sophisticated than it should have, because, like, there's a bunch of very complex investment products and speculative products which can cause a whole bunch of disruption in the market and hurt consumers at the end of the day. But if we skip aside, like, more kind of investment grade stuff and this, like, the speculative side of finance, and if we focus more on the day-to-day, let's call it retail finance, right? So finance which happens to be on our day-to-day lives, I think we have yet to find the model so that these companies, so financial services companies, the model with which they can play a deeper and more meaningful role in people's lives. I think today, companies like Cofidis and others, they are mostly enablers, right? So they serve as the infrastructure for people's financial lives to run on, right? So you have a checking account, you have a debit card, you have a credit card, you can ask for a personal loan, these sort of things. But there's still a huge gap between the needs, like the deeper needs that people have regarding their finances, namely around education, namely around the sophistication on how you manage your own personal financial decisions and this sort of stuff, and the role that these companies actually play, right? So in my mind, this is going to be powered by technology, but it's not necessarily a technology play. This is more a repurposing of these institutions and of finding ways to be there for what people really need. And people, they just don't need the basic finance infrastructure, although they have it and it's getting better and better, right? Before, for you to be able to get a bank card, it would be a pain in the ass right now.
Right.
And there's companies that open a checking account in a couple of minutes and send you a card over the mail. And that's good, right? So the basic UX of finance, retail finance, is improving. But on a deeper and more meaningful side of things, I believe that these companies have yet to find the right model, the right products, the right services, the right relationship, the right channel to play a more meaningful role in people's lives.
Can you give us just an example of a product or maybe an initiative that Cofidis is doing towards that vision of becoming more, I guess, financially sustainable in people's lives?
Yeah, so...
open banking, is it part of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think open banking is a good one, because I think it opens. It's a piece of let's say applied technology on top of regulation, which opens up a bunch of very interesting use cases, not just around better UX, better experiences, etc., but also around additional value that you can deliver to customers. For example, on how you have analytics on top of your account so that you can understand where you spend your money on. You can get perhaps tips around how you can optimize your budget, or you can compare your spend with, let's say, an average spender in your country to see whether you're above or below, and have recommendations on how to optimize and get a better financial health, for example, right? So these sort of things, like, they can be powered by open banking, but they can also be done in different ways. So in Cofidis, for example, we've been using for a while although we are a remote operator, we've acquired part of a bank a few years ago, and because of that acquisition, we have a couple of branches spread across the country, but it's relatively small. It's a bit more than 10 branches, and we've launched a financial checkup service, which is not based on open banking. Like, it will be based on open banking tomorrow. Today, it's not based on open banking, but which allows us to get
which is
available in branches
for anyone, Cofidis client or not.
Yeah.
And what is the outcome of that financial?
So basically, it's very geared towards debt service reduction, right? So basically, what are your financial responsibilities, right? So the credits that you have, the multiple ones, etc. How much do you pay, and what is the level of debt to income that you have, right? So basically the amount of bandwidth that you have on a monthly basis for your other expenses, and this ties in very well with some debt consolidation products that we have at Cofidis, which are very useful to aggregate customer debt,
right,
and essentially restructuring that debt and bundling it in one single financial product with a lower monthly expense or fee that or payment that the customer will have to repay. Yeah.
So, João, we're coming close to the end of this podcast, but before that, let me just, obviously you have been the manager, have been the leader of this innovation division. Innovation leadership here means leading with people, leading with tech, leading with the rest of the industry, leading with the company itself. My question is, what kind of things do you remember yourself every single day to lead you on your mission? Your North Star, if you will.
I think I'm really a big believer in incremental improvement, and both on a professional side of your life, but also on the personal side of your life. Actually, I think this philosophy, to me, it emerged more on the personal side. Like as I looked for ways to be a better person, and to be more disciplined, and to have better relationships with people around me. And then I discovered like the power of compounding interest, right? So, and this idea that if you're able to improve just a tiny bit every day,
1% over every day, it's over 1,000% in a year, right? So
exactly.
It's crazy.
So this obviously it's a metaphor. These things you can't measure them so easily, but I have this constant reflection going on whether, like, I was able to do something a tiny bit better today than I did yesterday. And I think this is a very powerful concept when you're leading an organization, because people can get very distracted. Like I get distracted often. Like there's a lot of noise going around. There's a lot of things. There's fires kind of popping up everywhere. There's concurrent priorities. But this ability to step back, to look at things objectively, and to do a bit of reflection frequently around whether you're improving a little bit on this, on that, I think that's very important.
João, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been, great getting to know you a little bit better. To be honest, I didn't know some of the details that you shared with us today, and your experience in this industry, which is financial, but it's also increasingly more a technological platform as well, right?
For sure. I mean, it was lovely to be here. I think it's an exciting industry, and this idea that, as one day the CEO of BBVA a couple of years ago mentioned, like, we are not a financial services company anymore. We are a tech company that happens to deliver also financial products. And I think, this sounds interesting and provocative and romantic, but I truly believe in that as well. I think, like, our company today is essentially a technology company. People have a super important role, because I think technology will only make people more relevant in things which make humans different from machines and from algorithms. And I think it's also been so far a very interesting journey to reflect on how we can better foster an environment where humans can grow, where they can find their place to add the most value to the lives of our customers and our merchants, and where we can invest in technology and digital products to basically bring quality and scalability to our business.
Thank you, João.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, cheers.
Thanks.